My parents proclaimed, "Lily is blind," and ordered my corneas to my sister, but I exposed their fabricated operation instead. Now they're begging for help. My parents wanted to steal my eyes. Not metaphorically, not in some twisted family drama, but literally. They demanded my corneas to save my sister, Lily, and when I exposed their medical fraud, their calls for help started. But this time I was ready. It all began when my dad called, his voice serious, about Lily's future. She was blind at 27, a genetic issue stealing her vision over 4 agonizing years. I drove 2 hours to my childhood home, expecting to discuss care or aid programs. Instead, I walked into an intervention. My parents, Aunt Evelyn, and Lily were waiting, and the air was thick with expectation. Dad dropped the bomb. Lily's doctor had found a therapy, he claimed, one that could restore her vision, but it needed a genetically compatible cornea donor. And after testing the family, I was the only match. He looked at me, pleading, "You can save your sister's life." I asked about donor waiting lists, but he cut me off. "Lily can't wait. Her condition is deteriorating. The surgery has to happen within 3 months." Mom started crying, detailing Lily's struggles, losing her graphic design career, her boyfriend, barely leaving her apartment. Lily sat there, silent, hands folded, a picture of quiet despair. I just needed time. Time to consider, time to investigate. But Dad's whole demeanor shifted. "Nothing to consider," he snapped. "This is family. Siblings help each other." He leaned in, his voice dripping with accusation. "You have 2 working eyes and Lily has none. Refusing to help is extreme selfishness." He made me feel like I was hoarding something that belonged to everyone. Aunt Evelyn chimed in. "Any respectable person would offer their corneas if they were a match. You should be thankful you can help." Then it got truly bizarre. My dad told me the doctor promised I could see perfectly fine with one eye. "Depth perception and peripheral vision are just extras," he said. "One-eyed people live full lives. You're young, healthy, you'll adjust." He even told me I was wasting Lily's time by talking to the doctor myself. When I finally asked Lily what she thought, she said, soft and weary, "I don't want to pressure you, but losing my sight has taken everything from me. I understand if you can't, but I'd never forgive myself for not asking." Before I could respond, Dad cut in, "It's not asking when the answer should be obvious." He scrolled through his phone, showing me old photos of a vibrant, smiling Lily drawing and traveling, then current ones of her miserable with her white cane. He practically spat, "You're allowing this to happen." Mom then said they'd already contacted the surgeon, set tentative dates for next month, and paid a non-refundable deposit. They'd even told Lily's friends she'd see again, bought her new art supplies for recovery. Everything was planned, everything except my consent. When I tried to leave, to think things over elsewhere, my dad barred the door. "You're not leaving until you say you'll help your sister," he declared. "If you walk out that door, you'll leave this family forever." I'd reject any child who could help their siblings and refused. They badgered, they promised to pay for everything, to make me a hero. I managed to slip past Dad and left. The next 3 days were hell. My phone was a constant source of torment. Dad's voicemail suggested I was slowly killing Lily. Mom texted photos of Lily struggling with daily tasks. Aunt Evelyn posted vague, passive-aggressive messages online about family disappointment and selfishness. Other relatives called, asking why I wouldn't support my sister. But my dad wasn't expecting what I did next. I called Lily's doctor, the one they'd supposedly consulted, and that's when everything shattered. There was no novel cornea surgery. Lily was on a regular transplant list, like everyone else, and would likely receive donor corneas within a year. Living donation for her condition? It simply wasn't how cornea transplants worked. The doctor had never discussed it with my family. Live corneas could only be taken for extreme emergency trauma, and even then it was rare and required intense ethical clearance. When I told him my family story, he was appalled. I sat in my car outside my parents' house, phone in hand, for 25 minutes shaking. My mind, though, felt strangely clear, cool, like I'd stepped outside my own body, seeing everything without the guilt they'd fed me for years. Shadows moved behind the living room drapes, probably waiting for me to apologize. Another call from Dad, ignored. I started my car, heart pounding, and drove the 2 hours back to my place. I needed distance. I needed a strategy. Dad's angry voicemails kept coming, accusing me of abandoning Lily. By the time I reached my city, he'd left 9. Mom texted too, begging me to come back and resolve this as a family. I kept both hands on the wheel, unmoving. That night, at midnight, my laptop screen glowed in my dark apartment. I Googled family manipulation and medical fraud. Everything I read described exactly what had happened to me. The fake emergency, the emotional hostage situation, the financial investment to create pressure. The premeditation made me sick. Articles on coercive control, families forcing organ donations, psychological tactics designed to make you doubt your boundaries. I read for 4 hours, taking notes, bookmarking pages, reliving my childhood with every paragraph. The next morning, I called my friend Brandon. He knew my family, but wasn't close enough to be swayed. After I poured everything out, there was a long silence. Then he said it. Your dad tried to convince you to give up an eye on utter lies. Hearing it out loud, from someone else, made it real. I cried, the first time since leaving my parents' place. Brandon came over that afternoon, coffee and laptop in hand. We spent hours documenting dates, medical lies, the doctor's words, the financial pressure. He helped me fill out abuse documentation templates. He urged me to seek legal advice. What they did bordered on illegal fraud and coercion. By night, I had 35 missed calls and dozens of texts. Mom imploring me, accusing me of being unkind to Lily. Dad ranting about disrespect and betrayal. Evelyn a long message about how my dead grandmother would be disappointed. My cousin texted, asking if I'd had a breakdown. The bombardment was overwhelming. I blocked their numbers. I felt bad, even though I knew they'd taught me guilt. Brandon said, healthy families don't make you feel terrible for needing distance to process lies. His words shattered my heart, and I cried again, but he just sat with me. 3 days later, I called the doctor again. He was incredibly courteous, said he'd been worried about me. He promised a written statement verifying he never discussed living cornea donation and that Lily's health didn't allow it. He even asked if I was safe and if my family was harassing me. He'd email it by end of day. I then contacted Natalie Harper, a family coercion attorney Brandon recommended. She listened, explaining that prosecuting family was complex, but what they did could be attempted medical fraud and emotional abuse. She suggested documenting everything for a restraining order. We met that week. Natalie helped me draft a cease and contact letter, clear and firm. It stated the cornea surgery was fraudulent, that I had Dr. Carter's documentation, and I needed time to process the deception. We warned that further harassment would result in legal action, and all future correspondence had to go through her office. It was printed on her firm's letterhead and sent certified mail. 3 hours later, while heating leftover pasta, my phone rang. Unfamiliar number. I answered, thinking it was Natalie. My dad's quiet, controlled voice, the kind that made my stomach plummet when I was 13, made me freeze. He spoke carefully, like he was teaching a child who wasn't grasping simple concepts. You've been listening to the wrong people, he said. Outsiders who don't understand our family have poisoned you. He asked who I was talking to, what they'd said, why I'd let outsiders harm our family. I glanced at the screen. It was Aunt Evelyn's number. He was hiding his identity. Brandon had urged me to record family calls. My hand shaking, I fiddled with my settings, started the tape. Dad's voice softened, grew sad. I love you, he claimed. Family is forever. despite our problems. He warned I'd regret burning these bridges when I needed them and found them gone. Lily's crying herself to sleep every night because her sister abandoned her. Your mom is heartbroken. Everything he said sounded sympathetic, yet felt like a threat. Then I mentioned Dr. Carter's written declaration, the part about the surgery never happening. 6 seconds of silence. The call ended. Just dead air. I stood in my kitchen, phone to my ear, hand still trembling. The next morning, a knock on my door. Through the peephole I saw my mom. She looked smaller, more exhausted than I remembered. She must have found my new address. I need to talk, she called through the door. Your dad doesn't know I'm here. I drove all this way. The part of me that remembered bedtime stories and birthday cakes couldn't leave her in the hall. Against every therapy article I'd read, I opened the door. She looked like she'd cried the whole way. She sat on my couch and started talking fast. We only wanted to help Lily. Maybe we got some operation specifics incorrect, but our hearts were in the right place. She claimed the doctor had mentioned transplants at some point, so they thought living donation might be an option. When I pointed out Dr. Carter never discussed living donation, she just said they'd misunderstood. Medical terminology was complicated. They were just trying to understand Lily's alternatives. She even tried to claim my dad hadn't scheduled surgery dates, but was studying surgeons who could perform it. Her story shifted with every direct question. First, the procedure was real, but simplified. Then they misunderstood. Then, Dad was just trying to find creative methods because the transplant list was too long. She never said we lied. Never, I'm sorry. Just reframed everything as a misunderstanding by desperate parents trying to help their disabled child. Did you know the operation wasn't real when you ambushed me? I asked, cutting through the excuses. She cried harder, her face crumpling. You're unkind. You're interrogating me instead of focusing on Lily's misery. She said she came here thinking I'd understand their fear, how willing they were to try everything, how families were supposed to support each other. I kept asking if she knew the truth, but she kept circling back to Lily's sorrow, my coldness, everyone's disappointment. After an hour of going nowhere, she left, saying she'd tried her best and couldn't do anything more if I believed the worst. I was emotionally weary, confused like I'd been hit by a car. Brandon came over that evening. I tried to make sense of it. After listening, he simply said, Your mom never addressed any of your questions. She sobbed and diverted, making you feel horrible for asking. He was right, but realizing it felt like I'd lost both my parents, not just my dad. For days later, the calls began again, but from other relatives. My cousin Madison called, asking why I'd stopped supporting Lily after agreeing to the surgery. She claimed my parents were devastated by the lost deposit. I calmly stated I'd never agreed and there was no genuine surgery. She went silent, saying she hadn't heard that. My uncle called next, saying I'd gotten cold feet and devastated Lily before her operation. Dad's sister called, saying she knew I was nervous, but canceling after all the arrangements was selfish. Each person told a slightly different version of me as the villain who pledged to help, then abandoned my disabled sister. But the details were always wrong, proving my parents were intentionally spreading a lie. Nobody mentioned the operation was fake or that I discovered it. They said I had happily donated my cornea. Everything was arranged. Then I just changed my mind. I called Natalie Harper. We emailed the most sensible relatives and the ones who had yelled at me. Dr. Carter's written declaration, clarifying the procedure was never medically viable and that I'd never committed to anything. Half the recipients fell silent. For cousins and one aunt apologized for leaping to conclusions and said they should have asked me. But 2 relatives, including my uncle, yelled at me again for leaking private family business and making my parents look bad. My uncle said that even if the specifics were exaggerated, my parents were trying to help Lily, and I was being vengeful. Some people, I realized, would ignore the truth if it damaged their family story. The constant replays of conversations, the studying of what everyone said, made work difficult. I'd be examining a report and suddenly remember Mom's face as she evaded my questions. I'd be in a meeting and realize I hadn't heard anything for 6 minutes. Eli, a coworker, noticed. He dropped by my desk, offering coffee, his tone showing he knew I wasn't okay. He'd check in during lunch, not asking what was wrong, but making sure I ate. He took me for walks, casual enough to avoid pity, yet consistent enough to know he was worried. I appreciated his quiet presence. One afternoon, over coffee, I finally told Eli everything. My family lied about a medical emergency to manipulate me, and now they were spreading lies about it. He listened patiently. Then he revealed he'd cut ties with his own family 4 years earlier due to similar manipulation. His parents had used his brother's addiction to dominate, making everyone feel guilty. He'd realized he couldn't be with people who saw him as a tool. He scribbled his family trauma therapist's name and number on a napkin. The next day, I called Dr. Selena Ward's office. Thursday afternoon appointment. In the waiting room with blue walls and comfy chairs, I filled out intake forms. When she called me back, I sat down and just cried. Before she even asked a question, she gave me tissues. "You can weep," she said gently. "This is a safe area." I wondered if I was insane or overreacting, if my parents had just misinterpreted. But as I described the ambush meeting, the fake surgery, Mom's evasions, her careful listening led me to new concepts. Gaslighting, enmeshment, narcissistic family structures. Gaslighting, she explained, meant making someone question their own reality, like my parents claiming they'd misread medical info when they'd manufactured a procedure. Enmeshment was when family boundaries were so blurred, individual needs were sacrificed for the family. I'd been raised to put Lily's needs before mine. Suddenly, I could name things I'd felt my whole life but couldn't articulate. Second and third sessions followed. Dr. Ward asked about other instances of similar pressure tactics. I remembered the scholarship. Full ride to a university, 5 hours away. My parents insisted I needed to stay local to help Lily, who was losing her vision. They made it sound like any nice sister would want to be nearby. I turned down the scholarship without question. Then my college fund shifted to Lily's medical expenses without my consent. Dad just sat me down junior year, telling me Lily needed the money more, and I'd understand later. Mom cried when I decided to study abroad my senior year, calling it selfish to leave the family when Lily was struggling. "You should be grateful you can see the world while she's blind." I'd always accepted it as regular family sacrifice. But sitting in Dr. Ward's office, listing them aloud, revealed a years-long trend. Every time I wanted anything for myself, there was a reason Lily needed it more. A reason I was selfish for asking. A reason a good daughter and sister would choose differently. After another week of blocking my parents, the silence felt less like a void and more like breathing space. One night, on my couch, I unblocked their numbers. My heart pounded as I typed a message, deleting and redoing it 3 times. Clear, concise, no room for misinterpretation. I know the operation was false. I have Dr. Carter's medical documents to prove it. I require 7 months of no contact to process this and will file a restraining order if harassed again. My fingers shook as I clicked send. I flipped my phone face down. For minutes later, a notification. I grabbed it. Dad's reply, a paragraph without punctuation, calling me dead, saying I'd chosen strangers above family, and spit on everything he'd given to raise me. He called me a liar, a traitor, and hoped I'd live with the guilt of abandoning Lily when I could have saved her. The words blurred. I read them twice, then again, waiting for the crushing shame he expected. Instead, I felt fatigued. Sad. Like watching someone destroy their life and knowing I couldn't stop them. Mom's deluge of crying emojis and brief messages followed. "How could you do this?" So cruel. Losing your family over a mistake. She sent a picture of Lily, alone looking lost. You're breaking her heart. I shut off my phone. And that night, for the first time in weeks, I finally slept through. 3 days later, Lily texted me from her own number. I stared at her name. She started soft and careful, unlike our parents. She acknowledged things had gotten tough. She admitted our parents may have exaggerated the procedure, that everyone was frantic and afraid, that she was struggling and I should help her. She understood my anger, but hoped we could resolve this as sisters. It sounded practiced. I heard my mom's voice and how Lily framed everything as a misunderstanding, not a lie, making it about her suffering, not their deceit. She'd been tutored at the kitchen table, going over every phrase. I waited a day, consulting Dr. Ward. She advised me to ask Lily straight questions. So, I typed a single line, no elaboration. During our family meeting at our parents' place, did you know the Corneas surgery wasn't real? I clicked send, watched it deliver, then waited. Hours passed. A lengthy day. 3 days without speaking felt louder than any explanation she could have offered. When she finally responded, it was long paragraphs of explanation that never answered my question. Lily wrote about her blindness, how she relied on her parents for medical knowledge, how she trusted their treatment options, how she was a victim. She was terrified, couldn't work, couldn't drive, desperate enough to believe anything hopeful. Our parents lied because they loved her. The whole message was designed to make me feel sorry for her, to focus on her pain, not their lies. I read it 4 times. She never said yes or no, just filled paragraphs with backstory, making my questions seem cruel. Brandon came over, and I handed him the text. He pointed out what I'd already noticed. Lily's non-answers are their own solution. He opened his laptop. Let's examine Lily's illness and prognosis ourselves. We spent an evening researching her genetic condition on medical websites and patient forums. I registered anonymously on a support organization forum for my specific problem. My username was random letters. I asked if anyone had heard of living cornea donation as a therapeutic possibility, keeping my language generic. Responses flooded in within hours. Many people confirmed it wasn't a real procedure, recounting desperate family members who'd fallen for scam clinics or misinterpreted transplant waiting lists. One person described their aunt spending thousands on a phony treatment center promising miracle cures. Another said their father urged them into living donation before their doctor said it wasn't possible. Reading their stories, my chest tightened with validation. I wasn't insane, and anguish that my family had put me through what so many others endured. At my next meeting with Dr. Ward, I spread the printouts across her coffee table like trial evidence. After reading the forum postings and medical publications, she looked at me with a mix of sadness and pride. She helped me realize that Lily was both manipulated and a participant in our parents' manipulation. You can have compassion for Lily's rough life, Dr. Ward stated, while still holding boundaries regarding the lies. She noted that Lily's non-answers and deflections were manipulative skills learned in my house, watching our parents distort reality until everyone was too bewildered to hold them accountable. My connection with Lily might be irreparable, but the session made me feel clearer, even if lonelier. That weekend, I forced myself to try something new, something vulnerable and dangerous, completely unrelated to my parents. In a church basement across town, I joined a family alienation support group for adults. Entering that room of strangers felt like admitting my family was broken, not just going through a hard patch we'd mend. In a circle of mismatched chairs, we introduced ourselves. I said I'd cut touch with my parents after they lied about a medical emergency to influence me. My voice shook. I had to stop talking to avoid crying. Next to me, a woman gripped my hand. She explained how her relatives had pressured her to donate a kidney based on exaggerated medical urgency. The guilt trips, the selfishness allegations. She felt like a monster for questioning her brother's emergency. Her brother's doctor had told her he was on a waiting list, not in danger. Her parents had fabricated the crisis. The similarities to my story were so strong that I cried through the rest of her story and the next 4. After the meeting, I felt exhausted but less alone, surrounded by individuals who knew that sometimes you must leave your birth family. My stomach dropped when a certified letter with my parents' names in the return address arrived a few days later. Shaky hands. I signed for it, carried it inside, stared at the official envelope for 25 minutes. A lawyer, threatening to sue me for emotional distress and slander for sharing Dr. Carter's statement with relatives. Legal terminology, terrifying paragraphs about damages and accountability. I called Natalie Harper. I read her the entire letter, my concern growing with each word. She listened carefully. Then she told me what I needed to hear. This is traditional intimidation. No legal basis. Truth was a solid defense. I had proof. She advised me to copy it, keep it in my file as proof of ongoing harassment. It would improve my case for a restraining order. My cousin Chloe called me the next week, her voice tight and uneasy. She told me my parents were spreading a new story. I'd had a mental breakdown, was making false claims because I was unstable, and my therapy was proof I was mentally sick. Chloe didn't believe them, but thought I should know. I thanked her, hung up, and sat on my bathroom floor, shaking with intense wrath. Everything else I'd survived, but weaponizing my healing process, that was a betrayal too far. I started therapy to process their abuse, and now they were using it to blame me, turning my attempt to get healthy against me. Work became my only sanctuary, where I felt normal, competent. No one knew about my personal crisis. I worked late, volunteered for extra assignments. Eli noticed my transformation from distracted and withdrawn to almost frantic productivity. He started checking in, bringing coffee, taking me for walks. I appreciated his presence. For months after the confrontation, an unfamiliar number called. After Mom's ambush, I was wary, but something compelled me to answer. It was Lily. She was crying so hard, I couldn't comprehend her first words. "Our parents are driving me crazy," she sobbed. "The house is tense. Dad's angry. Mom's depressed. I can't take the silence and fighting anymore. I need you to come back and repair things." I listened to her, torn between the childhood sister I remembered and the one who'd sat silently as our parents tried to steal my vision with lies. "None of this is my fault, Lily," I told her. "I didn't cause the problem by exposing their lies. They started it by lying. My job isn't to fix the repercussions of their actions." Her voice, piercing and aggressive through the speaker, snapped back. "You're selfish and self-righteous. You're punishing me for something our parents did." She blamed me for her suffering, said the house was a nightmare, and I could fix it all by restoring normalcy. That moment, it showed me she still didn't view herself as part of the deception. She saw herself as an innocent spectator to our parents' scheme, even after remaining mute throughout their manipulative intervention. I told her I had to go. I hung up. My next therapy session, 3 days later, I told Dr. Ward about Lily's call, her accusations. Dr. Ward listened, explaining family system patterns, how dysfunction is inherited. "Your dad probably learned these manipulation tactics from his own parents," she said. "He grew up where coercion and guilt were normal tools. Families like yours prioritize protecting the most vulnerable and put everyone else's needs last. Lily was frail due to her blindness, so the family sacrificed you to console her." Breaking these patterns, Dr. Ward observed, often meant being blamed for being mad and not cooperating. The family needed someone to blame for changes. Usually it was whoever demanded honesty and boundaries. "It's lonely," she claimed, "but vital. Staying in the dysfunction to avoid being the bad guy means allowing the pattern to continue into the next generation." For days after that session, browsing social media, I saw a post from one of my mom's friends. A GoFundMe for Lily's medical expenses. The description made me queasy. It discussed Lily's blindness, a probable surgery to restore her vision, and strongly hinted that family problems prevented it. It was cautious, avoiding saying I'd backed out, but readers would infer a family member had failed to aid. Within a week, it raised about $3,500. Friends and distant relatives left prayers and small donations, lamenting Lily's lack of aid. I felt terrible. They were crowdfunding using the same lies, raising money from others, unaware the operation was bogus. I texted Natalie Harper and Dr. Ward screenshots, asking for advice. Natalie replied within an hour. "This is fraud," she insisted. "Not just family manipulation. They violated GoFundMe's guidelines and probably state fraud laws by soliciting donations with bogus medical information." She reminded me, "You have Dr. Carter's documentation. You can report the campaign and get it taken down." But she warned, "It will explode your family. Your parents will know you're deliberately working against them, not just keeping distance." When I took it to therapy, Dr. Ward said something similar. Even if their actions were wrong, was I ready for the consequences of exposing them publicly? I thought about all those individuals donating based on lies. My parents benefiting from the same plan they tried on me. "I'm reporting it," I told them. Natalie Harper helped me. We reported the fraud to GoFundMe support, sending Dr. Carter's statement, the timeline, screenshots of my parents' communications. The legal aid clinic even wrote a letter. I waited 7 days. Nothing. I wondered if GoFundMe even cared. Then the campaign vanished. A statement violated community norms. Natalie told me later that GoFundMe flagged my parents' account to prevent future campaigns and asked them to repay donations. My dad's email response came in a deluge. I still blocked his number. He said I'd embarrassed the family in front of the town and made everyone think they were scammers. He accused me of being bitter and harsh for hurting them when they were trying to help Lily. The messages grew angrier, less logical. Mom wrote shorter texts. "I can't believe you'd do this." Reporting them was too far. "You're ripping the family apart over pride." The next Tuesday, my receptionist called my desk. Someone was in the lobby asking for me. I went down, perplexed. Mom was there, smaller than I remembered, exhausted and sorrowful. She didn't approach the security door. She came up, handed me a thick packet, and left without a word. I watched her walk to her car, the envelope clutched in my hand. My name, her looping handwriting. I couldn't open it at work. That night, on my couch, I opened it. 6 notebook pages, Mom's handwriting, both sides. The closest either parent had come to honesty. She stated Dad went too far with the operation plan because he wanted to assist Lily. He believed the ends justified the means. She agreed, she wrote, because keeping peace with him is how she survives their marriage, and openly disagreeing makes life unpleasant. She understood I was angry, but asked me to understand they did everything for Lily. The letter described the terror of seeing Lily suffer, how powerless they felt, and how the phony surgery looked like a method to inspire me to help without realizing it was incorrect. She closed by saying she missed me and hoped I'd return to the family, that she understood if I needed time and that she loved me. I read it twice, put it back, and cried for 25 minutes. It was near to what I needed, but still so far. Not because it changed anything. I took the letter to my next therapy appointment. Dr. Ward read it carefully. "It's more honest than prior communication," she noted, "but still an excuse." My parents explained their behavior, but never apologized for my injury. She pointed out that Mom went along with Dad's plan because it was simpler than fighting him, choosing her comfort over my well-being. The letter asked me to comprehend their motivation, but offered no restitution. Dr. Ward showed me that understanding why someone mistreated you doesn't mean you should stay. You can sympathize with them while avoiding their actions. I didn't have to stay with my dysfunctional mom. I started sleeping through the night again. For months after the argument at my parents' place, I could concentrate at work without thinking about family. I planned weekend activities with friends instead of staying miserable at home. I quit checking my phone every few minutes for angry messages. Waves of pain still hit when I remembered childhood memories or saw a family doing typical things, but they stopped drowning me. I began to envision a world where I could live without them without it hurting. I worked, came home, saw friends, went to therapy, lived normally. Some days I barely thought about them. Lily texted Wednesday afternoon. Not because she cared about me, I knew. She informed me she was getting corneas from the transplant list in 3 months and having surgery early next month. I was plainly meant to feel guilty, the final word an accusation wrapped in information. I lingered with my phone. Then I typed, "I'm glad your surgery is set. I hope you have a smooth recovery." I meant it. I didn't want her to stay blind, regardless of our relationship. She read it instantly. No reply. I put my phone away and went back to work. Brandon and I had coffee on Saturday. We checked in every few weeks and I'd update him. This time it felt different. "I'm ready to move on," I told him. "From the past." He paused. "What does that look like?" I poured sugar into his coffee. "I want to help others with family manipulation," I decided. Maybe volunteer at Natalie Harper's legal aid clinic or lead support groups. Use everything I learned to help others feel less alone. Brandon grinned. "That's right. Turning grief into purpose is how people live." We spent the afternoon discussing practical actions, him helping me find opportunities and draft an email to Natalie. Natalie Harper emailed me information on a family rights organization the following week. They wanted hotline volunteers. 5 3-hour courses covered coercion methods, crisis resources, and how to support without overstepping boundaries. I listened to case studies that sounded exactly like my life. The facilitator discussed medical emergencies, financial strain, guilt, and duty exploitation. I underlined statements describing my parents' abuse on pages of notes. On the 3rd session, we role-played calls. I played the caller first. "My brother needs a kidney and my parents will disown me if I don't contribute." The helpline volunteer acknowledged my thoughts and asked about my health. I started weeping. No one in my family had asked about my health during the cornea crisis. The facilitator paused the activity. I told him this had happened to me, with corneas instead of kidneys. "That's why peer support is so powerful," she agreed. "Because we understand from the inside what manipulation feels like." 3 weeks later, I worked my first hotline shift. I logged into the system from home, headset on, worried about discussing family issues with strangers. My first call was about aged care resources. I reviewed the list. The second call, Madison's voice shaking. Her family asked her to drop out of college to care for her sick grandmother full-time. Her parents thought she was selfish for putting her education before family, that her grandmother deserved better than paid nannies. Madison kept saying, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I am selfish." I recognized every manipulation tactic. I reminded her that loving her grandmother and having boundaries about her life didn't make her selfish for caring about her education. Manipulative families use guilt to control people, I told her. True love doesn't require you to sacrifice your future to prove your allegiance. I told her about family medical leave programs, caregiver support groups, setting boundaries without cutting ties. She cried, thanked me. Nobody taught me it was normal to seek my own life. After we hung up, I cried in my apartment. I wished someone had said those things a year earlier. The next afternoon, at Dr. Ward's therapy appointment, I thought about Madison and how trapped she sounded. I told Dr. Ward about the call. I recognized myself in this stranger's circumstances. I said, that's how the helpline is going. Seeing your suffering in someone else's narrative was the hardest and most healing element of peer support, she added. Since my family had been fractured for so long, I had no framework for healthy relationships. We reviewed a relationship patterns worksheet. Love should respect boundaries, not punish them. It meant accepting no without reaction. It meant helping someone grow, even when it was inconvenient. Everyone on the list was the reverse of how my parents acted. Seeing it written out made me sad, but also relieved. She asked me to notice green flags in my other relationships, how friends and coworkers exhibited genuine concern without strings attached. That weekend, I downloaded a dating app. I was lonely and wanted to practice talking to people who didn't know about my family mess. My profile just listed my profession and hobbies, not my previous year. I went on 4 dates in 3 weeks. I enjoyed being a normal person, making small talk over coffee, even if it was awkward. The third guy, Mark, software developer, loved hiking. Easy to converse with. On our second date at a Thai restaurant, he casually asked about my family. My gut clenched. I told him the line I'd been preparing with Dr. Ward. We're not close. I rarely see them. He nodded, fair. Some families are complex. Next, he asked about my favorite hiking trails. He didn't ask for details, didn't try to repair things. It seemed revolutionary. I could date someone without my family turmoil dominating. My cousin Chloe texted me 7 months after the fight at my parents' house. We'd been close as kids, but different lives as adults. I always liked her. Her text claimed she'd been thinking about our last conversation, the one where I tried to explain why I couldn't donate my corneas. She said my parents' account never made sense, and the more she thought about it, the more questions she had. She offered to meet for coffee, apologizing for not contacting me sooner. I stared at the message, shocked how much her belief mattered. I'd made peace with being the family villain, accepting most relatives would support my parents, but seeing someone challenge their story? A surprise. We met that Saturday at a coffee shop midway between our apartments. Chloe was waiting with 2 lattes. She hugged me tightly. I'm so sorry I didn't question things sooner, for accepting their explanation without defending you. I sat down. I told her everything. Showed her Dr. Carter statement on my phone, the timeline. She listened without interrupting, her face shifting from astonishment to wrath as the picture formed. Then she shared her own unknown anecdotes about my parents, being compelled to lie for them when they neglected events, contorting events to evade accountability, always blaming others. Family confrontations where she had to take sides, barred from challenging their account. She claimed observing me setting limits allowed her to assess her own connection with them, to recognize patterns she'd ignored for years. For 2 hours, we talked, our lattes getting cold. Chloe reported that Lily's cornea transplant operation 2 weeks earlier had gone smoothly. She was thrilled for her, slowly regaining vision through physical therapy. She said my parents were still claiming the procedure was sponsored by GoFundMe before it closed, trying to seem nice. Their deception couldn't be admitted. Unable to accept that the transplant list had delivered the corneas as promised by the doctor. Even after Lily recovered, they rewrote history to evade culpability. Dr. Ward suggested I write a letter to my parents that I'd never mail to process my emotions. I used to think writing to unread individuals was meaningless, but after talking to Chloe, something shifted. That night at my kitchen table I typed 12 pages single-spaced, everything I couldn't express. I wrote about the upbringing I deserved, where I wasn't just a healthy kid supporting my sister, where my needs mattered as much as Lily's. I imagined our relationship if they'd been honest and respectful. I recounted memories of being ignored, diminished, expected to sacrifice without question. I emphasized that the cornea arrangement was the final indication of a lifelong pattern. I told them about the damage they'd done, the treatment I needed to undo their indoctrination, the family I lost because they chose deception over truth. I cried as I wrote it, my chest throbbing for parents who never existed and never will. The next weekend, my printed letter arrived at Brandon's. He'd offered to help me with a closure ritual, something tangible to terminate my hope that my parents would understand or change. As he lit his fireplace, I held those 12 pages, feeling the weight of everything. Brandon asked if I wanted to read any aloud, but I refused. I started throwing the pages into the fire. My words twisted and burned, vanishing in smoke. Watching them burn felt like letting go of the idea that they might ever be my parents, recognizing that closure had to come for myself. Brandon stood next to me until the last page was gone. Then he handed me a beer. We sat on his couch silently, accepting that some things are unfixable. The following Tuesday, I thought my meeting was about the Henderson project. Instead, my manager, Chloe, offered me a promotion to senior coordinator with more responsibilities and a big pay raise. She said I was leading difficult projects, doing well, and they wanted to invest in my growth. I pondered the offer. 7 months ago, I was barely functioning, crying in bathroom stalls, consumed by family turmoil. Now I was flourishing, doing my best work, ready for more. I thanked Chloe, celebrated at a good Italian restaurant that night. Wine, pasta, tiramisu at a window table alone. Proud of my life, untouched by my family. Tuesday nights, the support group met in a community center basement that smelled like stale coffee and floor cleaner. I went because Dr. Ward believed it would help, but by week 6 it felt less like homework and more like belonging. 9 regulars, dealing with varied family dysfunctions. 3 women became my people. Chloe was alienated from her parents for 4 years when they tried to force her into an arranged marriage. Maya's family shunned her for being LGBT. We had coffee after meetings, movies on weekends, random texts. I laughed until I wept when Chloe told me about her awful dating life. I really needed Maya's brutal common sense to cut through my guilt spirals. They understood the sadness of losing family you never had and starting over, unlike my other friends. It was the first time I felt like I had sisters who supported me. We called ourselves the Island of Misfit Toys. For weeks later, an unfamiliar number made my phone beep over lunch at work. Aunt Evelyn. Her short, cautious text said she'd been thinking a lot since that dreadful day. She understood my parents had deceived her, feeding her their version, pressuring me. Not expecting forgiveness or a relationship, she wrote. I just wanted you to know I saw the truth and regretted my role. The message ended with her wishing me well, understanding if I never spoke to her again. My chest shifted. Not absolution or reconciliation, but awareness. It mattered more than I thought. I texted back, thanks for telling me. No demands, no expectations. Just honesty bursting through family fog. October turned into November. My cousin Madison invited me to Thanksgiving at her house. She said she'd invited a few cousins who were tired of my parents' problems and wanted a holiday without drama and manipulation. Saying yes made me concerned it would be awkward, or someone would bring up the mess. But I missed typical families. 7 of us squeezed around Lauren's dining table. Despite expectations, the day was easy. We ate too much turkey, talked football, played board games without a single mention of my parents, Lily, or Corneas. My uncle listened to my responses about my work promotion. Lauren's kids showed me Halloween sweets and tried to teach me TikTok dances. I felt something I hadn't felt in months. I hugged everyone goodbye, promised to attend Lauren's Christmas party. I could have family without my parents. My 2 things were different, so I didn't have to lose one to protect myself. Chloe from the support group introduced me to her co-worker in December, Logan. Pleasant, easygoing. We went on 4 dates before I had the confidence to tell him about my family. It burst out a yelled confession between pad thai bites at a Thai restaurant. 6 minutes of incoherent exposition. Logan didn't interrupt, just nodded. When I finished, he drank his beer. His family had problems too, he said. His mom let his alcoholic father go to rehab throughout his childhood before leaving. He understood having a complicated past and choosing something better. We bonded over having families we couldn't fix and futures we were forging on our own terms. It felt good to be with someone who knew certain things were unchangeable. He didn't criticize me or recommend I give my parents another shot. He accepted it as part of my story and asked about my favorite movies. 7 months after that terrible day, the Family Rights Organization asked me to lead a new support group for young adults dealing with manipulation and compulsion. I said yes without thinking, then spent a week worrying about my qualifications. But sitting in that circle of 9 frightened 20-somethings in the first meeting, I recognized I was good at this. I knew the manipulative tactics because I'd experienced them. When a girl detailed her mom's guilt trips, I understood. When a guy said he felt crazy because his family's account of events didn't fit reality, I trusted his perception. I provided real resources, helped folks create limits, and reminded them they weren't selfish for defending themselves. Making my darkest experience benefit others felt like alchemy, turning poison into medicine. After each meeting, I drove home exhausted but satisfied, having found meaning in agony. Lily texted me late December. My phone lit up. I was thrilled, sad, and relieved to see her beaming at the camera, clear, focused eyes. The message I can see again. I congratulated her, said I was delighted the procedure worked. She said, "Thank you," asked how I was doing. We had a quick, measured conversation. She never apologized for the lies or admitted what happened. I didn't press. We might have a real, honest connection eventually, but I wasn't holding my breath. Cordial sufficed for now. 4 days early, a Christmas card arrived, forwarded from my old address. A generic winter scene. My parents wrote, "Thinking of you during this special season," with both their signatures. No reference to the past 7 months. No apology. Nothing. Just a cheerful card, like we were a normal family who'd lost touch. At my next therapy session, Dr. Ward and I discussed its meaning. She explained they were testing me, seeing if I would rug sweep everything if they pretended it didn't happen, offering me an easy way back to the family if I did. We discussed how replying at all would suggest they could lie, manipulate, and restart the connection without taking responsibility. That night, I threw the card away in my kitchen trash. I didn't reply. Silence felt like a response. The Family Rights Group sent an unexpected email in January. They asked me to join their board of directors. Strategic planning, financing, program development for family trauma and coercion victims. Accepting meant establishing a new identity. Not just as someone who'd survived family manipulation, but as someone helping others do so. My tale began to make sense beyond what occurred to me. It was a guide, proof that you could trust yourself, set boundaries, and live well. That night I applied. 3 weeks later, I got the acceptance call. At the first board meeting, I introduced myself to the other directors and felt like I'd found my people. People who channeled their anguish into action and made their experiences meaningful. Brandon invited me to supper in February. "I'm proud of your progress," he blurted, looking at me with fondness and awe, as we ate takeout pizza on my couch. I realized sitting there that I was proud of myself. When my whole family disagreed, I trusted my own judgment. I kept my limits despite pressure, guilt, and threats. I established my own support system, sought a therapist, joined groups, made friends who supported me. Doing a job I loved, dating a wonderful person, guiding groups, celebrating Thanksgiving with respected cousins. It all made me joyful. My birth family no longer defined me. I used to know them, but their decisions were unacceptable. I decided to construct better without them. 5 months into dating, Logan asked to meet my family. We were watching a movie at his flat when he casually stated it was an obvious next step. I paused the movie, turned to him, my pulse racing. I told him the truth. Permanent estrangement from my parents. Not a phase. Not a disagreement we'd get over. A decision I made to protect myself from dishonest and disrespectful people. I waited for him to act odd, to suggest I was exaggerating, that family is family. Instead, he asked, "What do you need from me? Do you want me to ignore it? Are you good discussing it sometimes? Or do you need me to intervene if they showed up? It felt warm. This was what healthy looked like. Someone who respected my boundaries, inquired what I needed, rather than telling me what to do. I kissed him. I might need assistance, I said, but mostly I need you to accept my truth. That's simple, he said. We resumed the movie, my head on his shoulder, my hand in his. In March, I started apartment hunting, browsing postings during lunch breaks, visualizing settings that felt like mine. My current lease expired in 3 months. I wanted something bigger, somewhere I could host guests without cramping, somewhere I could paint the walls without authorization. In my favorite area, I found a 1-bedroom with hardwood floors and wide windows, 25 minutes from work and near my support group coffee shop. My promotion paid the additional cost. Signing the lease felt like claiming something. I wasn't honest with my folks when I filled out the post office change of address forms. Physical and emotional distance matched. 2 hours on the freeway and an unlisted apartment number they never had. Moving day was busy, heated. Brandon, Logan, and my support group pals drove to help load boxes. After unloading, we had a pizza party on my new couch while Jenna hung drapes and Logan built my bookshelf. The flat was full of laughter, silly jokes, punctual guests. I recognized this was home, not my childhood home. But this environment I picked with individuals who appreciated and valued me unconditionally. A year after the incident, I sent an essay to a family dynamics online publication. To preserve my privacy, I wrote about everything under the pen name Cassandra Mills, the bogus surgical plan, manipulation, and breaking free. The editor approved it within a week. Seeing my words published gave my nightmare meaning beyond just being horrific. The post went online on Tuesday morning. By evening, hundreds of comments. People recounted family compulsion, medical manipulation, being forced to sacrifice their bodies or futures for relatives who denied alternatives. A mother used similar tactics for a kidney donation. Another family lied about a sibling's cancer to induce donations. I read the comments with tears in my eyes, shocked and appalled by how many families operated like mine. How many people had been gaslit, deceived, and made to feel selfish for having body limits. April brought unexpected news from my cousin Chloe. After visiting a handicap adjustment and family systems therapist, Lily began to question her role and what transpired. Chloe said Lily mentioned me in one of their recent chats, admitting the surgery plan was improper and she should have questioned it more. I felt cautious, confused, maybe a remote chance. Not yet ready to reach out. Not sure I'd ever be ready. But knowing Lily was working on herself, a future reunion, felt feasible without being forced. What happened may be discussed later. Maybe we'd find a partnership without manipulation or guilt. I didn't need that to be okay. My choices were validated without her understanding. I sat in my apartment on a Friday night with my chosen family. Logan made his renowned pasta sauce. Brandon and Jenna bickered about a movie. 2 support group friends laid the table for dinner. We celebrated my promotion to senior coordinator and my 1-year anniversary of setting limits. 2 big events. I looked about at these folks who supported me, appreciated my decisions, and never made me sacrifice. I realized I was pleased. I doubt my parents will apologize or take responsibility. Sometimes relatives still thought I was the monster who abandoned my disabled sister. But I accepted that didn't define me. It was impossible to grow up with honest, respectful parents and a sister who valued integrity over manipulation. But I had my life, my tranquility, my self-respect from refusing to be tricked into giving up parts of myself. It was enough.